It was time for the final game, and the players were invited into the arena, and in front of them were 3 high towers of different shapes: circle, triangle, and square. The rules of the game were simple. 1 or more players must be eliminated in each round. Sounds fair enough, but the decision-making between the players on who it was going to be was only going to bring chaos among them. At this moment, the other 6 players turned against player 456 and the baby, since the baby was also declared a player. On the other hand, player 125 started seeing the ghosts of the 2 people he caused their deaths. It was the side effects of the pills he took before the game. And while he was busy fighting off his demons, the remaining 5 players who have decided to stick together and share the money once they're out of the game started approaching player 456 and the baby. They were going to push them off the tower in order to move to the next round, but there was a problem. There were 8 players remaining, and if the 5 of them wanted to survive, they must push 1 person out at each round. But player 456 and the baby makes 2 people. Meanwhile, all this time, the real father of the baby was silent so he doesn't get hated on. But then he spoke up and suggested that they all turn against player 125 and use player 456 and the baby for the next round. The group of old men agreed to this, not knowing he was buying time for his baby since the mother had died in the previous game. While they all turned against player 125, he resisted and threatened to go down with whoever tried to push him down. But player 333, desperate to leave the game with the money and his baby, used an iron pole which was provided on the towers to push him down. And now the 15 minutes time frame that was given to them was over, and they passed for the next round. For the next round, they have to cross a bridge between the first and second middle towers. The other players had crossed, and now it was player 456's turn to cross over, and immediately the bridge closed. Once again everyone turned against him and the baby. But before they did anything, player 333 suggested that they separate the baby from him before pushing him off. They all agreed, but that was not going to be easy, so they plotted and tried different ways to make their plans work. But yet player 456 outsmarted them in every way, causing chaos between the men. But player 333 came up with another idea. He was still determined to save his newly born baby. So the players agreed to play rock, paper, scissors to determine who was going to attack player 456 and take the baby from him, and from the game they played, it happened to be player 336 to do the job, so he was tied to a rope the men made from their jackets. But while he attacked player 456 and the baby, player 456 cut him loose from the rope. And within this moment player 333 saw the opportunity to push him away, which he did by using the pole as player 456 dodged. It was at that moment that he made the confession of being the father of the baby. At this moment, the other players were shocked and felt betrayed, and now they're faced with 2 people who had weapons, so they tried to play smart by betraying one of themselves. Player 139, they beat him up, broke his bones so he was handicapped, and called him a lunchbox, meaning once they crossed to the next tower, they would sacrifice him by throwing him off to pass the game. But yet player 456 disagreed with them on this wicked idea. This made player 203 and player 353 furious, and they attacked both player 456 and 333. In the process of struggling with one another, player 456, in the course of self-defense trying to save himself, and the baby, stabbed player 203 and he died on the spot. Meanwhile, both player 333 and 353 were still struggling with the pole, and then player 333 kicked him off the tower. Now 5 players remain in the tower, including the player whom they called the lunchbox. The old man, player 100, was scared and suggested they all cross over with the lunchbox and use him, but player 333 wanted a bigger share of the money, so he pushed player 100 off the tower as well. At that period the time frame was over, and for a moment it seemed like everything was all sorted out for the remaining players. But then player 139, who was beat up, killed himself by falling off the tower in disagreement of him being a lunchbox to be used by the remaining players. Now the fate of player 456, 203, and his baby 222 are twisted, which means one of them has to die. Player 456, who made a promise to the mother of the child, wouldn't let go easily, while player 203, the father of the child, wouldn't let go as well, and the two people that was brought together due to the same interest of the baby are now going to be enemies in order to save themselves. It was time for the next round, and the bridge between the middle towers and the last tower had been opened. Player 333 crossed over to the next tower first. He had a reason for that, and by the time player 456 was about to cross over, player 333 had taken the pole from the tower, waiting to push him down while he was still at the bridge. Player 333 threatened him to hand over the baby and stay behind in the previous tower, but this was going to eliminate player 456 even before the last round started, which means if he died before the last round started, player 333 would be left to choose between him or his baby, and it was obvious from his desperation that he was going to sacrifice the baby for him to live. Player 456, realizing what this meant, disagreed with him. The bridge between the two towers were going to close within 5 minutes, and the two players had already wasted time arguing. But player 456, seeing the time remaining before the bridge closed, had no choice but to give player 333 the baby while he stepped back to the previous tower. But while player 333 looked away and the bridge was about to close, he ran and jumped over to the next tower. The two players fought each other, and during the process they fell out from the tower. Except player 456 was able to hold an iron which was used to make the tower, while player 333 grabbed onto his suit. But his weight made the cloth to tear in half, and player 333 died, and once again player 456 is now the surviving player together with the baby. But still one of them has to die, and in that moment player 456 sacrificed himself for the baby by falling deliberately on his back from the tower. It was a sad ending.